Good morning guys and welcome back to the channel. Remember, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell and you'll be notified every time we post a video. Cheers guys. The M55 BMW engine. So as you can see, we've got the crank in. You're probably wondering what that funny object is in the end. That is the drive that we use, or one of the drives we use for balancing the crank. So we've just put in there so we can turn the crank, because obviously there's a boss that goes in here that turns the timing chain. Anyway, so Paul and I have set about putting this together. Now, I don't know whether any of you are familiar with the BMW cradle setup that holds the crank in. So this is a cradle here that ends on this line here, consisting of all the main bearings as opposed to separate caps. So what you do is you put the cradle on dry, which seems a little bit alien to how you normally build engines. Normally you'd put some, either a gasket or some silicon sealant on either a sump or something, but on a cradle you just put some silicone around there. But what you do on this, you put it on totally dry, and then in through these little one-way valves, basically, inside here there's a channel that's cut out into the cradle and the block face, a very thin channel, about 1.5 millimeters, that goes all the way out to, you see there where that little bit of green stuff is? Either side goes all the way round and then comes out the other side. See there? And what you do is you put it on dry, you torque it all up, and then you inject this stuff, basically. So this is an anaerobic sealer, so it does not go off while oxygen is getting to it, but where it gets into a space where there is no oxygen, it then goes hard. So that is what we use, and the reason they do that, and we use that, is so you get nothing in between the two mating faces, so it mates absolutely perfect and doesn't hold the cradle off the block in any way. So that's what we do. We've done that, and you just inject it. It goes down both sides of the channels until it comes out either side, as you can see. And then what we're going to do is we put the main seal, the rear main seal, in afterwards. We did it the first time. Now, weirdly, it's a bit of a weird torque setup on this. So it's 20 Newton meters on all these bolts, working from the inside out, you know, the normal sequence really. So it's 20 Newton meters, then 70 degrees on all of these. So you do those first, and then on the outside, you have a series of about 36 aluminium bolts. And you do these up to 15 Newton meters and 90 degrees. Now it feels horrible when you're doing these up. You do them in a sort of a pattern, the same as the mains bolts. But when you do those up afterwards, it feels like you're pulling the threads. They're awful. And obviously you have to reuse them, you have to renew them if you have to undo them. So yeah, not very nice feeling at all. But the first time Paul and I put this in, weirdly, I don't know why, but the crankshaft sort of, it feels like it's locked when you go to turn it, and then as soon as it starts moving, it's free as a bird. So being paranoid, don't like the feeling of that. As I said to you in the last video, these new engines should turn absolutely freely. There's no reason why they shouldn't. We always size the journals on bottom limit, and we generally do like the big ends on the top limit, so they should turn absolutely freely even with the rods in. But it didn't feel very nice, so I've had all this apart today. We've cleaned it right off again, we've done it all again, and now it feels absolutely lovely. So without any hesitation at all, you can literally turn that with almost 2 fingers if I was strong enough. But yeah, that feels absolutely lovely, silky smooth, and that is how it should feel like. The only resistance there, from what you can feel, is for the oil on the bearings, so that is lovely. Right, so the Cosworth with the ductile iron liners that I'm installing or machining the block for, I know that I've showed you this job a good few times before in previous videos, but I don't know whether I've actually showed you how I do the flange cutout in the top. So this is the liner that's going in. It's a solid ductile iron liner, and as opposed to machining the block or the bore with a step down the bottom and just putting a straight liner in, we don't tend to unless we have to, and there's no way we can do a flange at the top. We like to do the flange at the top because it's a bit more of a precise fitment, and also once the liners are in, the gasket can seal on top of the liners as opposed to the block, or half the liner, half the block, so you haven't got that gap. So that's why we fit in these. The flange groove in the top. We've obviously done the bore. As I've said to you before, we like to leave a 3 thou interference for these liners in the block. So that's what we've done. First of all, I've noticed a couple of comments in a few of our previous videos, people sort of recommending that we get a better boring bar. This one's a bit of an old sort of sewing machine. I can see their point as in it mating on the bottom face as opposed to the top, because if the only trouble is with this, because the parallels mate on the top of the block, if it's been faced before and it hasn't been faced absolutely true to the bottom, then you're boring it off the incorrect face really, as opposed to the base. So yes, that is probably one reason why we should get another one, or you would have another one. But this thing, as I said to you before, this thing, if you get to know it, it's very, very accurate. It is probably a bit more time consuming with jobs like this, but at least I know that it's going to be right. I'm used to the machine, you know what it's like. Because these blocks are very valuable now, I like to probably take a little bit more time and make sure it is absolutely correct, rather than leave it completely automated. So to do the flange groove in the top, what I do is I do 30 thou cuts at a time. The first thing I do is obviously set the tool, once the thing is bored, set the tool at 30 thou bigger, and touch it on the top. And when I say touch it, what I do is I lower the boring bar and just move the head using this at the top here. And you can see that moves the tool backwards and forwards, and I just wind the handle down until it just touches on the top. What we do then, now this is going to set a lot of you guys off in the comments saying it's a bit of a Heath Robinson setup and it's not very accurate, but believe it or not, it is pretty accurate. First of all, the flange depth on these liners are 180 thou. We have treated ourselves to some new DTI gauges. They are imperial, so we can still work in thou. We haven't got to convert it to metric. I know a lot of you would prefer us to work in metric, but we just prefer imperial if we can. So what we do, once the tool is touched on the top of the block, we then put the magnet base onto the boring bar, and we basically lower it down until it touches on the top of the head here, and then we zero it. So we know that 0 then is the tool touching on the top of the block. Then what we do is we wind the tool off the block slightly, and we put a first cut on, and what happens is, as the boring bar goes down, as does the DTI gauge, and it pushes the needle up off the top of the actual head. We sort of watch it go round, and when it gets up close to about 160, we turn it off, and then we know we've got about 15 thou protruding. So you can normally, from when you press the stop button, say if I press the stop button on 50, it's going to stop within about 5 thou. So yes, it's not that precise, but it's precise enough for what we want. So it leaves the liners sort of sitting up about 10 or 15 thou. Right, so we've just got one more cut to go. The setting, I've got to set this to exactly 4 inch, which is one more 30 thou cut. So that's exactly 4 inch. So pop this in here, making sure you get a nice metallic noise so you know that there's no swarf or anything behind it. And then what I do is just wind it down and touch the tool onto the job, and then back it off. And then if we engage this, put it in feed, and you see the gauge there. So it should go, you see it go round, and when it gets to 0, you can hear it start cutting. So all the way round will be 100 thou, and we want to go back up to the 50 really. So you see it stopped within about 4 or 5 thou of me pressing the button. So that now we know is going to leave about 15 thou protrusion of the liner once it's in. So that's one done. Just go over to set it up on the next one. Right guys, so we've just had another job come in, and I thought I'd better show you this really. Fortunately, it's not anything, we haven't got to build anything, it's just machining and checking. But this is a Lancia Fulvia 1300. So I'm not sure whether you've seen one of these or even heard of one, but yeah, getting a bit of a rare beast now. So it's a little bit, the design, it's a narrow V4, a little bit like the VR6 Golfs really. So we've got, what we've got is an aluminium crankcase here that holds the crank obviously, and then you've got separate barrels on top of the crankcase. These are cast iron barrels, but just in the same format and design as the VR6. It's in a very narrow V. I mean, these are probably only about 20 odd degrees, obviously run down to the crank, and then you're going to have, piston wise, you're probably going to have a sloped, I can't remember the length. Yeah, you see, you've got the slope top on there, so it's just like the VR6 Golf really. So, and then you've got the separate head, just one cylinder head that goes on the top. It is an 8 valve, so you've got the cutouts in the pistons there. So what this one's in for, it seems to have done all the showers, so it looks like an oil starvation issue, although it hasn't spun any of the mains, which is good news. But because these are getting so rare now, obviously bits are getting a bit hard to find. So we've got to check the bores, see what they measure at. The owner that had it before, the guy that's just bought it, had it for years, and he seems to think that nothing's been done or there's no history of it being apart, but it looks evidently like it has been apart before. So we've got to check the cylinder head, make sure the guides are all right, check the bores. If not, we've got to bore it. So this is going to be a home job. That's if we can get pistons. And then we've got to check the crank. Now at first inspection, just looking at the crank, visibly it didn't look too bad at all, but that's not to say it's not bent or gone down in size, so we're going to have to check that out. Fingers crossed he doesn't need another crank. If we have to grind that, we're not going to be able to go beyond 10 thou before we have to nitride it again, because that's been nitrided as standard. And then obviously we've just got to check to see if the main bearings are true in the housings there. So yeah, a bit of a rare one that, guys. We did build one of these actually, probably about 8 years ago now. But yeah, not very often you come across one of these. Right then guys, so whatever your views are on our vlogs and our videos about the warranty claims, the moaning and this, that, the other, at the end of the day, that was part of the style of our videoing really. From the very beginning, we wanted to tell you the ins and the outs and what have you. We do get a lot of comments off people saying, all I ever hear is moaning from you guys, all I ever hear is the comebacks you have. But if you actually watch all the videos, you know that it's not all comebacks. We just tell you the tales of the sort of negative side of running a business like ours really. It's not always our fault. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. A lot of the times it isn't really. If you watch them all thoroughly, you would understand that. But anyway, we've got another one for you, and I've got to tell you. So a while back we did a video on an engine that we've got still sitting here on a pallet, all done. Just to very briefly recap on that, I'm not going to mention any names, not going to mention even what engine it is, but we'll just sort of recap and give you a brief description on what I'm going on about. The middle of last year, we did send an estimate out, spoke to the customer via phone. He wanted an estimate for a rebore and a set of pistons. So we sent him over an estimate, didn't hear anything back. A year later, we then get a phone call saying it's on its way, we'd like to go ahead. So when it turned up, it wasn't just a cylinder head for a reface, it was an entire engine. It was a complete bottom end, but with the head on loosely. So I got hold of him. In the meantime, I've gone to check the prices on the pistons, and they have gone up. So I thought I'd better inform him. So I've rang him up and I said, look, your pistons have gone up from the estimate. Obviously all bits have gone up in the last year or two anyway. He said, yeah, that's fine, they are what they are. I said, but we haven't just had a head turn up here, we've had an engine, so obviously there's going to be extra work. yeah, you know, it all needs to be done anyway. He said, best thing for you to do is my mechanic is doing the job. You speak to him, liaise with him, because he obviously knows what needs to be done. And I said, well, that's fine. I'll do that then. So spoke to his mechanic. He says, yeah, what, you know, you've got that there. He said, strip the bottom end, whatever needs to be done, bore, face the block, go through the head and that, because if I'm putting it back together, it all needs to be right. So that's what we've done. In the meantime, I have been speaking to the customer as well to say, does he want, you know, the rest of the gaskets, all that? Yeah, whatever it needs. So we've done it. In the end, the bill was about, with the VAT, about £2,400. He's then come back at us, whether he was acting stupid or you know, playing the game or really didn't understand, but he was fixated with this original estimate. I said, well, firstly, it wasn't a quote, and secondly, as discussed on the phone, it's completely different. It's a completely different job. I know some of you guys commented that we maybe should have followed it all through with emails, which we do now, but back then we didn't really, and we've never had to before. You know, bear in mind, most of our work's been local work and all this, and the way I see it, it's a verbal contract over the phone, and you know, anyway, he wouldn't have it. So in the end, I just thought, well, he's obviously trying it on. He wouldn't understand anything that I'm trying to say. I thought, well, no one can be that ignorant, really. He must understand what I'm saying. I said, well, the only thing we can do is send all the bits back, which was probably about £1,100 of it plus the VAT. I said, and then you've got near enough £1,000, about 850, 900 quid for the labour that we've done, which was agreed by you and your mechanic. Yeah, no, he was trying to knock me down to sort of 600 quid. I said, no, we just can't do it. You know, we'd rather just send us an email saying that we can have the engine and we're more than willing to sell it, or we'll just hold on to it until we can and recoup the money. Well, I had an email earlier on from a debt recovery company trying to recover £1,300. So I've rang them up, and first of all, I've looked at the name, and it's not the name was given by the gentleman that rang me up, the customer. And I said, yeah, I'm just trying to, is there a mistake? He said, no, it's so-and-so. He's trying to recoup the money for an engine you won't give him back. I just started laughing. I said, hang on a minute, if we're talking about this particular engine, he owes us £2,400. Oh, no, yeah, he said you got a quote. I said, no, we never sent a quote. Yeah, well, we got some quotes. I said, what quote have you got in front of you? He said, well, we got one here from the 7th of 2001. I said, have a look at the top right-hand corner. It's not a quote, it's an estimate. Oh, yeah. Well, we've got an invoice then for last month, £100 storage fee for the month. I said, yeah. And that's what he'll be getting every month. I notified him at the beginning of September that he's going to be, from there on, going to be getting storage fee. Oh yeah, he's trying to recoup because he said you won't give him the engine back. I said he can have the engine back. He just needs to pay us the money he owes us. I said, I've sent the bits back. So if he wants me to re-invoice it, I'll re-invoice it for just the labour. But he can have the engine back. So he's trying to sue me or recover more than what the invoice was just to get his engine back. So he wants me to pay him to send his engine back. I've never heard anything like it. So clearly, I said, listen, best off not liaising with me. You can have the details to my solicitor. Just get in touch with them because they know the ins and outs of it. But I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be guys that comment on here saying that it's my fault and I should have maybe liaised and through email and you know, writing or whatever. But I don't know, guys. That just completely baffles me. It's a new one to me, but nothing's new these days, is it? Well, that's it for another video, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think about that little scenario. I don't know. But until another video, have a great weekend and we will see you then. Take care.